This is Phantology.
You may have heard of us.
9 days in and all is lost. Or is it? I mean, it doesn't look good, right? But that shouldn't really surprise you. I mean, the day before the big conclusion, the enemy's got the upper hand. That's somewhat expected in a narrative like this. I guess the question remains, how much of this are we going to be able to get back or change or do something before the ultimate conclusion on the 10th day? So that said, it should really be no surprise that Odium is in the number 1 spot in the Day 9 power rankings. It looks like he has won all 3 of the battlefronts, barring the Shattered Plains, which something a little more obvious to us is going on. It looks like Venli's group is occupying this with some kind of secret piece of parchment, and I'll get to this in a minute, but he's definitely got Thalen City. I mean, I guess barring another surprise in Day 10, but that seems pretty ironclad. He totally outmaneuvered Yasna, and I'll get to this too, because this was not my favorite thing by any means. And then he's finally thrown enough muscle at Azimir, and I mean, we haven't completely, like, maybe our guys are still there, and it's, you know, there's still time, but it's not looking good there. So big wins for Odium, and really, like, not a whole lot of signs of resistance. I mean, I guess Dalinar has learned a lot, and we still have the whole contest coming up, so we'll see what happens. But Day 9 events, really, really nice job, Taravangian. Number 2, Kaladin. Kaladin finally with this big hero moment, and are you kidding me, with the flute and the recalling back to the Way of Kings and the story of the Wandersail, and man, this was awesome. Like, if you think back to it, the whole thing with the Wandersail and the people that had the king that was dead, that were making him do stuff, like, this story didn't really completely make sense for Kaladin's character at the time. But you know what it does make sense? What character it does make sense for? It makes perfect sense for the crazy Herald of Justice Nail. 4 books later, we're bringing this back, and the Tones of Roshar in the story are going to overwhelm him, despite all of these abilities that he's showing in his fight with Kaladin. So it seems like Heralds have extra sets of abilities, which had kind of been hinted at, but this is cool to see. Kaladin's not very good with his plate on, and, you know, I guess it's kind of new to him, but ultimately his trust in the wind and his trust in wit and his just ability to become a, you know, more nuanced person and be able to help others and also help himself and all this, like, this is all kind of coming together in this great moment, and I absolutely loved this part. Number 3 spot's going to Venli. Venli and Sigzil come up with a nice plan here. We don't actually hear what the plan is because it's boring to tell the reader exactly what your plans are on screen, but it does seem like it's some kind of trick plan to occupy the Shattered Plains for long enough to get some papers here. Maybe the papers, like a copy of the contract to throw in front of El's face, or, you know, just like the last little bit that they need here. But it looks like we have control of Narak Prime with the Chasm Fiends, that they got to sleep there, and so they're just hanging out here. And I'm loving it. I'm loving that they came together, Venli and Sigzil together, and they both brought elements of their plan and hashed it out. And Venli, not a favorite character at all in Rhythm of War, and she hasn't had a ton of screen time here, but she's doing pretty well, and I'm liking where the listeners are going. Renarin gets the 4th spot, and this has low-key been a really good book for Renarin. Coming into himself, just more confidence, and then also choosing his own future. And this really happens in Day 9, where he looks through all of these different possible futures that he could have, and none of them are, like, awful, but at the end he decides that he's going to go for it with R'lain, and R'lain is the one who understands him, and they have a really nice moment, and they kiss, and it seems like this romance is going off on the right foot. They're both willing to help each other out, despite what it seems like kind of the world will be against them as this human-singer partnership, which will, you know, is not the most popular thing in the world right now to bridge both gaps. Kind of like an Avatar type of thing going on here. Not a total crazy unique idea or anything with this plot, but a fun one and one that really fits where we're going here. There's been a lot of mentions of, like, how are we going to come up with something that works for the humans and the singers and keep everyone happy and do better than we have last time, and this seems like a good step forward here. And Navani's going to claim the final spot in the Day 9 rankings. For as much as I said Odium had a great day, his visions do not seem to be doing super great, or like nearly as much as have much of an impact as he wants them to. Seems like neither Dalinar or Navani is really, like, falling to the visions and becoming a worse version of themselves. In fact, Navani learns to control the visions and then harnesses that to find Gavinor and then to get out of the spiritual realm, which is important. We got to get everyone out of here before the 10 days elapse. And then she comes up and finds Wit and Lift, and that's kind of a funny moment. But I've appreciated Navani in this book. She hasn't had nearly as much hero time as she did in Rhythm of War, but for what she's done really well. Okay, bottom characters. Number 1 is going to Fen, the Queen of Thalena. This whole thing just did not land for me at all. This is probably my biggest criticism of the book thus far, and when we do a review later on, I'll talk about it more, so you might get sick of me saying this, but it just didn't work. Like, it seemed like Sanderson was trying to go super big brain here with the way that they were going to argue through things, and if you break it down like into a logical argument, I suppose it works, and you can probably break down all of the points and, build off all these conjectures and point here, and do your whole list, like logical list that I did back in college, but no one wants to do that when they're reading a fantasy book, and it kind of read like that. And at the end of the day, as the reader, we just see Fen agreeing to a bargain with someone who's like literally the devil, just the worst, and is the adversary in every way. And the fact that she agrees to this just because that he has proven that Yasna is just as bad, like, it just doesn't quite make complete sense. And I mean, I get that she's choosing to do what she thinks is best for her city, but at the end of the day, like, come on, have a little bit of a backbone. You're a leader here, you're a queen, like, stand up for what is right, and maybe sacrifice the greater good of, like, in the minute for a little bit of future insight. That's kind of what we need from our leaders, to look into the future and say, like, okay, what should we actually do? What's going to be, what's going to bite us in the back in 50, 100 years or whatever? And just going off on your own and joining Odium, like, this is dumb. I guess it works out for them now, but especially as a reader, like, this was rough to read, and I just hate that Fen, I dislike Fen for being the one to do this. Number 2 spot on the bad day list and in the bottom of the power rankings is going to be Sigzil. Once again, he's popped up here. This is just going to be unfair when I look back at all the days and see how many times Sigzil has shown up here, because overall, he, as a character, did a good job for the hand he was dealt, and I really love who he's turned into. But he's just stacking up these bad days, and things just keep on going worse and worse for him. And although he probably, like, it seems like he's got a good plan with Venli that he puts together, at the end of the day, he sticks around a little bit too long. Moash comes in, is about to kill Vienta. He has to sacrifice his oaths, and she dies, and he sacrifices her. And ultimately, this is the better thing than permanent death with the dagger. But at the same time, another just gut punch for Sigzil. I feel so bad for the guy. Number 3 spot, you're going to have to hear me go back over to the whole argument debate thing, because it's going to be Yasna Kholin. Yasna is one of my favorite characters. I am an Elscaller according to the quiz, and I identify with a lot of the traits that she embodied. So this was just really frustrating to hear her and see her get so profoundly defeated by Odium. And it was really just a whole flaw in the way that she approached things. You're going up against a god. He's got access to resources you don't have. It just seems like she could have kept things simple or changed the equation in some way, because she walked right into his trap. She was overconfident. She spent all this time researching stuff that wasn't even relevant. And ultimately, I mean, from a logical perspective, like, Taravangian did beat her. Now, it's frustrating that Fen sided with him and let the emotion cloud her judgment, because that's kind of a weak leader. But at the same time, it's also annoying and disappointing that Yasna allowed it to get to this point. Number 4 spot goes to Tanavast, honors Shardholder. There's a lot of details here. This is going to take me a little bit to get through when I go through all the details section. But this is a rough day for Tanavast as we finally learn everything that he went through over millennia. And he just seems like a guy who's a little bit out of his depths and wasn't ever ready to hold the power of honor, and kind of got schooled by what the power actually demanded from him. Never could actually get it into check, and kind of fell to it in little bits over time, and ultimately completely broke and failed all of Roshar and all of his charges. And like, this is really rough for him. I guess I'm not putting him in number 1, because ultimately he seems like a good guy at heart, and he tried, and he's helping out now. It is nice to finally see all the history, how it all came to be, finally get a bow around everything. Maybe, did Brandon really need to explain this quite as ad nauseum? Like, I don't know, we probably already knew all of these things, but it was still fun to get it from a different perspective and see Tanavast and understand what it is to be a god. I'm hoping that all of this knowledge helps Dalinar, and that's the reason that Tanavast is not lower on the list, because even though it's like a really bad day for him, I'm hoping this knowledge is like crucial for Dalinar's success later. Okay, the number 5 spot's going to Dino the Mink. This is a character that I don't care for. Never really liked him. I just can't really envision him as a human being, and I don't really think he's funny. And the fact that he's like the general and the martial mastermind of all of their plans, like, I don't know, I just never really got behind this. And then it's very annoying to me that he calls in his favor and his oath on Dalinar at this crucial time, and then he goes off to Herdaz to do his big thing, and he like totally fails, because even though he's this mastermind, he doesn't foresee that these caverns could have changed over the years. And like, come on, man, like you can't just, and he doesn't even take responsibility for it. He's like, oh, this plan would have been so great if not for this unforeseen thing. Like, okay, you're the general, you should foresee this. Like, that's kind of who you are. And if you knew that there was this risk built into it, maybe you shouldn't have made all these windrunners a crucial part of the army take you over here at this bad time. And like, this dude deserves this execution. Like, I'm sorry you got yourself into this, and I guess this great shell has come up at the right time, and who knows, I mean, but it seems like Herdaz itself is lost to the enemy, so I don't care too much to hear more about what happens to the Mink. I'm sure we probably will, but if we just wrote off this whole thing, like, I would be fine with that. Okay, here's the part of the video where you settle in and grab some popcorn, because there's a lot of details here, especially with the Tanavast part. So what all did you miss in day 9? What are all these details? Okay, so Tanavast, we get the whole like retelling of most of the history that we've already put together, this time from his perspective. So he arrives on Roshar with cultivation, then Ray's arrives, then the initial struggles with the power, because he initially, breaks his oath to not settle together with multiple shards, and here's cultivation, and he loves cultivation, so right away there's this issue, and he's having trouble controlling the power. Seems ominous. Together they create the Spren, and then he immediately gets involved in the war in Ashen. Ashen gets destroyed. We don't really get too many details here, and I think Brandon plans to get to that eventually, but all we know is that they have these surges, and they're unbounded at this point, and so Ashen is completely destroyed. The humans come over on Roshar. Ray's takes the Singers as his, because Honor basically just like forgets about them, and this is something that Tanavast does multiple times. He just kind of like pieces out for a while, and it seems like Ray's never does this, and that's like his ultimate undoing, is like, dude, pay attention to details. You're a god, and like recognize that stuff is happening around you. And he just seems like a little too arrogant, maybe a little too high and mighty to be God, and he never really cares for the individuals, and that's a lot of his undoing. Cultivation, Honor, and Odium all kind of get together, and they're about to throw down, but then they realize that if they did this, then Roshar would be completely destroyed, and we don't want that. So they sign this non-aggression treaty against themselves. They can't take direct action, but they can control others. So Honor and Odium immediately start to do this. Odium creates the fuse, and then Honor counters with his heralds, and then back and forth and so on. And, eventually we get the Radiance and the Oath Pact, and like all this history that we already kind of know through Honor's perspective. Millennia passes, and then we do have a direct conflict between Odium and Honor, and they basically just blow up Natanatan, which is the Shattered Plains of that time. So that's how that happened. And he mentions this special metal again that fell from the moon. What is this? It's not aluminum. Is it some kind of god metal, witch god metal? Like, interesting. I don't know that we'll get answers for this. Like, it seems like if we were going to get answers, this is where. Maybe this is important for later Stormlight books, 6 through 10. I guess we see it in day 10 tomorrow. I suppose that is possible. So then we get into the whole Fall of Honor sequence, and he agrees to support Baido Mishram if it comes to peace. But then he also swears to Odium that he will take out Baido Mishram if Odium will agree to the Conquest of Champions, so they won't have to have a direct fight and destroy Roshar. When push comes to shove, he decides to go with the oath he made to Odium, and he imprisons Baido Mishram. This unleashes this effect that we already saw on all of Roshar, and then finally the power fully rebels against Tanavast. Part of it breaks off with some of his persona to become the Stormfather, and the rest just kind of disappears, and Odium kills the remainder of Tanavast. Okay, now even with this done and basically concluded, a few interesting points. He talks about how he feels that it was a mistake to kill Adonalcium, and now the shards just have this singular persona, and really, like, no matter what it is, like, Honor is a good idea, but on its own, it's kind of a crappy idea. And then also Honor still, like the power still holds Odium to all of the bounds and agreements that he made, even though Tanavast has died. So this contest of champions exists, and the power of Honor will be, still searches the millennia for some champion to arise that will take up its power, but not immediately fight against Odium. That's the main thing that Honor does not want to do. That's pretty ingrained into it. So let's see if Dalinar can be this person in day 10. Venli, we pretty much covered already. The deal with Sigzil, kind of secretive, but it looks like it's going to be good for our heroes. And then I thought it was fun to see them charging on the Chasm Fiends across the plains. Like, this wasn't a big thing, and it was like really just a sham at the end of the day, but that was a fun moment. Navani also covered, except for, I think a pretty big thing is that Gavinor has been hearing voices in his head, and the voice is in fact revealed to be Odium. At first it looks like Elokar, but it's Odium. And if you've followed a certain theory that I think is going to play out, like it looks like things are playing out in this direction. So we'll see if the suckling child thing happens in day 10. So Szeth heads to the Skybreaker Monastery and decides not to fight Nail, but this appears to be a mistake pretty quickly because Nail legit tries to kill him. Luckily, Kaladin steps in with the power of the flute and music and the stories. They're able to take down Nail. And then we get a lot of interesting details and a little info dumpy, but whatever, I'm here for it. So we learn finally that it's not an unmade. As I imagined, it's Ishar. I didn't really guess it was Ishar. I thought that maybe it could be, but it makes sense now. Apparently, Ishar has taken up some of the power of Odium from the Shard Pool around the same time that Mishram did, or like because he saw that Mishram found the Shard Pool. Not really sure what all the details are around here. I don't know if we'll get those. They probably don't matter quite as much. But anyway, this is kind of connected to the idea that Ishar was holding some of the Herald's power in that one vision that Dalinar saw a few days ago. And then we get the Skybreaker Dissenter detail. And now we're headed off to the Bondsmith Monastery for the final showdown. And then what looks like to be the final set of flashbacks for Szeth. His rebellion thing just didn't go well at all. Very ill-fated, not very organized, never really had a chance, to be honest. Eventually, it's Nuturo who became the Bondsmith Honor Nimi, who kind of steps out from the crowd and pulls Szeth back from doing anything too dramatic and before too many people die. And then Szeth becomes truthless, and that's kind of how it all went down. Interesting that the voice wants him to hold on to that honor blade. And I mean, that's what caused so much destruction. So did the voice engineer all of this? We know it's Ishar now. So like, why would Ishar want him to do this? We also know Szeth's supposedly going to become a herald. Maybe it's part of it. Kaladin parts already went over 10 out of 10. Chef's kiss. Loved this. By far the best Kaladin part of the book. Okay, Sigzil once again. Lopen and the Windrunners arrive after the plan with Venli, then everyone retreats, and Moash comes in, and once again it goes really poorly, and Sigzil has now voluntarily killed his spren. Good decision, bad decision, you let me know, but now he's no longer a Windrunner. Okay, the only thing I'll say for Jasnah is, despite her big failure with the argument, Odium Teravangian already had a plot in place to take out the Thaylen Council, and that's a council that Jasnah had pretty much ignored. So even if she had won the argument and Fen had not been swayed, then things still would not have gone her way. However, you could also say, like, Jasnah, don't overlook the council and be a little bit smarter with the way that you're, putting your whole plans together. It just seems really sloppy and not Jasnah. And like, why was this so poorly put together? Like, I guess, we're going up against a god, so it's going to be hard. But at the same time, the Jasnah I know is more competent than this. Okay, Shallan doesn't get a lot of time, but she sees Mraize in this vision hanging out on a big great shell. And Mraize tells her that he's now on probation and it seems like he's going to have to kill her. I do wonder, where is Yatil? We haven't seen her since the very first vision, and that seems ominous. And also, why is Formless still around? Like, Shallan needs to take a step forward here. It's kind of frustrating that we still have this happening. So not a lot for Shallan in day 9. Some people did want me to go more in depth on the Chanticleers from day 8. I don't think I'm going to do that. It's just a lot, and it's been done better in other places. So check out the Captured in Words video that I linked to in the day 8 video. He does a much better job of breaking down the theory before Wind and Truth came out and explains the reasons why we were really pretty confident that this was going to happen going into the book. Adolin plays yet more Towers games with Yanagon. This time it's a 3-player game, And at some point, we do have to wonder, what is the point of towers in this book? It needs to connect. This time we talk about something called the Sunmaker's Gambit, where if you've got one army that's more powerful, it can still be defeated by 2 other armies. However, that doesn't really seem to be happening at all in Aesir. So where's the connection here? I really need this to land, because otherwise it feels like we spent a lot of pages building this whole towers thing up, and it needs to be like a really sizable landing for the amount of time we've invested in it. Elsewhere in Aesir, it's not going well, and Adolin is called to the defense of the city with everyone at this point. Like, there are no bodies that we can leave back behind at this point, and he fights in this pike block that's just like a hellscape of stuff. And then finally, the last shard bearer that's using Adolin's plate falls, and Abadai the Monarch takes that plate, and the Aesir blade, it has a name, but anyway, it was the one used by Nesaham most recently, and now the city's like completely overrun. Adolin is injured, but he gets up and he fights for a while until Yanagon and crew pull him out, and then all of our main characters from Aesir survive, like literally all of them, and then they make it to this safe house, and seems really dire. Now we're just kind of talking about how we're going to retreat out of here. However, we do still have this whole thing of like the Emperor on his throne will hold Aesir, so will that happen? The Emperor is still here in the city. Rlain is involved in this vision with Baido Mishram when the listeners first split off and he walks away. He's like in the body of the listener leader at that time. And Mishram seems pretty cool with it. Like, she's like, oh, okay, like I'm learning that maybe we want to change a little bit and incorporate you guys and be a little more inclusive. So Mishram, again, seems pretty cool. And Rlain gets this title of Bridger of Minds. And it seems like he's going to have some important stuff coming up as him and Renarin have a special position here as the human singer pair. Some kind of like diplomats to both sides that will bridge the gap. I guess we'll see. And now finally in the Odium interlude, Odium is thinking about destroying the power, decides not to because it would cause other problems, and he feels pretty confident in where he's at. Dalinar escapes. He goes to the physical realm, and we're relieved about this because otherwise the whole bargain and the contract would not have gone off as anticipated. And then interestingly, it seems like he vibes with the power of honor for a little bit. They're kind of at the same rhythm. And I am worried that could Odium get both powers? And that seems really bad because both of these powers are somewhat aligned. Hopefully Dalinar doesn't let that happen. It seems like Dalinar is like better positioned to get the power at this point. Like, he's learned all this stuff. So hopefully Dalinar gets it first, but gosh, if this isn't like foreboding in this few sentences where it seems like Odium and honor are somewhat aligned.